Hello everyone, and welcome. January 2026, Uganda. While the official results were being celebrated on state channels and the incumbent was being sworn into yet another term, a different story was spreading at street level and online, that the election wasn't merely controversial, but so compromised that it belongs in the same category as Romania's shock annulment, an election whose integrity was judged so damaged that the courts pulled the plug and forced a redo. In Uganda's case, nobody has annulled the results, at least not yet, but the hypothesis you're hearing is simple and explosive. Museveni won, yes, but the process was so uneven, so securitized, and so technically disputed that a serious legal or political rupture could still happen, or at minimum that the legitimacy gap could keep widening until the country looks like it's running two realities at the same time, the official one, and the one millions of people believe in their bones. To take this hypothesis seriously, we have to treat it like an investigation, not a slogan. What exactly happened around the vote? What evidence is being claimed? What do credible observers and institutions say? And what would it even take, legally, politically, and institutionally, for Uganda to experience anything resembling Romania's annulment moment? Before we proceed, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people like you. Tell us where are you watching us from, and don't hesitate to comments. Make sure that I read all your comments. Drop your opinions below. Start with the undisputed basics. Uganda held presidential and parliamentary elections on the 15th of January 2026. The Electoral Commission declared President Yoweri Museveni the winner with roughly 71–72% of the vote, and opposition leader Bobiwine second with about 25%. Numbers vary slightly by outlet, but the margin is consistently landslide-sized. The election was followed by a wave of allegations, intimidation, arrests, violence, disruptions of voting and tallying, and crucially for the annulment hypothesis, claims that parts of the process were technically compromised in ways that conveniently hit opposition strongholds. Reuters reported the contest was marred by violent incidents and allegations of fraud. AP documented a nationwide internet shutdown, failures of biometric voter identification systems, and accusations from Bobiwine of ballot stuffing and abductions of his polling agents, while noting the African Union mission said it did not find evidence of ballot stuffing, but still criticized conditions and urged improvements. Human Rights Watch went further, saying the elections were declared amid repression and abuses. Now look at the most Romania-like ingredient in the Ugandan story, the information environment and the credibility crisis. In Romania, the Constitutional Court annulled the first-round election in December 2024 after declassified intelligence and integrity concerns, and the EU opened proceedings related to platform risk and manipulation dynamics. TikTok became a symbol of the broader problem of elections in the age of influence operations. Uganda has a different architecture, but a similar vulnerability. When the internet is shut down around election time, you don't just disrupt communication, you disrupt oversight, parallel tallying, documentation and public trust. That's why the shutdown itself becomes a legitimacy event, not proof of rigging on its own, but a signal that the state expects conflict between what citizens see and what authorities will announce. AP explicitly linked the blackout to distrust, and Reuters also referenced the shutdown in the broader post-election dispute. And in a modern contested election, proof is often a war between narratives, the official tally versus viral clips, claims of missing DR forms, videos of ballots, spreadsheets, and testimonies, some real, some recycled, some fabricated. AFP has already fact-checked at least one viral rigging clip and found it used old footage from 2016 while being claimed as 2026. That matters because it shows the battlefield is polluted. Real irregularities can coexist with false viral evidence, and that mixture makes it harder to build a court-grade case, even as it fuels mass conviction that something happened. So what exactly is the inconsistency claim in Uganda's 2026 context? It's usually built from 4 stacked layers, and you can hear them repeating across interviews, posts, and conversations. First, process disruptions, biometric failures, delayed openings, missing materials, inconsistent adherence to procedures. AP reported biometric voter identification failures, and that these issues fed controversy and distrust. In many electoral disputes globally, this is where challenges start. If the verification layer fails selectively or frequently, your chain of custody and confidence erodes fast. Second, the security footprint. The argument that even if ballots exist, the environment was so coercive that the vote cannot be treated as free expression. Writers described a post-election crackdown and reported detentions and killings attributed to security operations after the disputed vote. The military chief made inflammatory public claims about detaining thousands and killing dozens, and the UN Secretary-General expressed concern and urged adherence to human rights and rule of law. The Guardian and Reuters both reported raids linked to Bobiwine's home and his decision to go into hiding, with government officials disputing elements while still acknowledging investigations and tensions. Whatever one believes about the numbers or motivations, this is the kind of post-election atmosphere that becomes part of the annulment hypothesis. Not only the count is wrong, but the context makes the count meaningless. Third, the tallying credibility gap, the claim that results were announced in ways that do not feel audit-ready to the public. In high-trust elections, losers accept defeat because systems are transparent, consistent, and verifiable. In low-trust elections, even a true result can be rejected if the process looks closed, hurried, or securitized. This is why allegations like no full tally published or agents removed matter so much in narrative warfare, and why they must be tested carefully if you want them to survive scrutiny. Some reporting and commentary around the election emphasized concerns about transparency and verification, while also showing disagreement among observers about the scale of ballot stuffing claims. Fourth, the Romania comparison itself. The idea that if Europe can annul an election due to integrity risks, why not Uganda? Here's the critical analytical point. Romania's annulment happened because the country's constitutional court has a specific role in validating elections and accepted the premise that the election process was compromised in a way that justified cancellation. Uganda's route is different. Challenges go to the Supreme Court via a presidential election petition, and the court decides whether irregularities substantially affected the result under Uganda's legal standards. The Ugandan judiciary itself confirmed that the Supreme Court began hearing a main petition challenging Museveni's election following the January 15th vote. That alone keeps the annulment hypothesis alive in public imagination. If a court petition is live, people think reversal is possible. But the bar is usually high. Petitioners must show not just wrongdoing, but scale and impact sufficient to overturn a landslide margin, and they must do it with admissible evidence in a constrained time frame. That leads to the most important question in this whole hypothesis. What would it take for Uganda to have a Romania-style rupture? There are three possible pathways, and only one resembles annulment. Path 1 is the most dramatic. The Supreme Court nullifies the presidential results and orders a fresh election or other remedy. This would be Uganda's functional equivalent of an annulment, though achieved through a different institution and doctrine. For this to happen, challengers would need cohesive evidence that irregularities were widespread, systematic, and outcome determinative, stronger than vibes, stronger than social media clips, stronger than isolated incidents. They would need audit trails, polling station-level documentation, affidavits that withstand cross-examination, and a clear narrative connecting failures, like verification breakdowns, to manipulation at scale. In a system where the declared margin is enormous, courts often demand enormous proof. The judiciary's hearing notice shows the legal channel exists. Whether it delivers a shock outcome is a separate matter. Path 2 is more common. The court acknowledges irregularities but upholds the result, perhaps issuing warnings, recommendations, or findings of misconduct. This is often how heavily contested elections end in hybrid regimes. The process absorbs dissent through litigation but does not reverse power. If that happens, the Romania-style annulment doesn't occur. But the legitimacy debate can intensify because supporters of the opposition interpret the ruling as evidence the judiciary cannot independently referee the contest. We've already seen signals of this sentiment in public reporting. Some opposition figures argue courts are not independent enough to provide remedy, and the dispute moves from legal to political and reputational arenas. Path 3 is the one people overlook: an annulment in the public mind rather than in law. This is where Uganda begins to resemble the emotional logic of Romania without the institutional endpoint. When enough citizens conclude the election is not credible, the formal result may stand, but governing becomes more expensive. More security, more crackdowns, more propaganda, more arrest, more fear, because legitimacy must be enforced rather than earned. Reuters reporting on detentions and killings after the vote and ongoing raids and threats in the political environment fits the pattern of a state treating legitimacy as a security problem. In this scenario, you don't get a court-ordered rerun, you get a widening gap between state authority and social belief. That gap is politically dangerous because it invites radicalization, external pressure, economic uncertainty, and succession instability. Now, if you want to dig deep into the hypothesis in a way that hooks viewers, the most powerful analytical move is to stop arguing fraud or no fraud as a binary and start asking what are the structural incentives that produce recurring contested elections in the same places. In Uganda's case, the incentives are layered. There is incumbency after decades in power, the fusion of party, state, and security interests, and the enormous stakes of succession, especially with the visible role of the president's son, military chief Muhozi Kainerugaba, whose statements and actions have repeatedly inflamed tensions and shaped perceptions of coercion. Reuters and The Guardian both documented his role in post-election rhetoric and incidents around Bobiwine. When a country's security establishment appears politically entangled, opposition supporters interpret any technical failure, biometric glitches, delayed counts, internet shutdowns, not as random friction, but as part of a governing strategy. Whether that interpretation is correct in every detail is less important to the viral narrative than the fact that the interpretation is plausible to millions because of past precedent and present behavior. And this is exactly where Romania enters the picture again as a psychological comparison rather than a factual equivalence. Romania's annulment became globally famous because it signaled that even in Europe, elections can be treated as fragile systems vulnerable to manipulation and information warfare. In Uganda, the story is inverted. The belief is not that foreign influence hacked the vote, but that domestic power structures shaped the field so heavily that the vote's meaning is questioned. Both cases are ultimately about the same modern dilemma. When trust collapses, institutions become arenas of conflict rather than referees. So where does that leave the hypothesis that Uganda could experience a Romania moment? The honest analytical answer is this. Uganda already had its Romania moment in one sense, because the election outcome is disputed widely enough that a parallel reality has formed, and because the post-election environment has been intense enough to keep the legitimacy question alive. But the specific mechanism, formal annulment, depends on whether Uganda's Supreme Court finds proof that meets its threshold, and whether the political system would accept such a ruling if it happened. Right now, the public record shows a petition process exists and is being heard. It does not show an impending annulment decision as a fact. If you want this to land hard with viewers, frame the ending around the real stakes, not one man winning or losing, but whether Uganda can ever create a system where elections settle disputes rather than ignite them, because that's the deeper fear behind the hypothesis. If the ballot cannot transfer power or even credibly measure consent, then every election becomes a trigger event and politics becomes permanent crisis management. And that's the final strategic lens. Romania's annulment shocked the world because it showed democracy can hit a red alert threshold and reboot itself. Uganda's controversy is shocking for a different reason. It raises the question of what happens when a country keeps hitting red alerts but never reboots, only tightens. Whether the courts deliver a dramatic ruling or not, Uganda has entered another cycle where legitimacy, security, and information war are colliding in public view. And the outcome will shape not only Museveni and Bobiwine but the entire succession era that's coming next. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, verify what you can, question what you're told, and keep your eyes on Uganda because the next chapter won't be written only in courtrooms, but in how many people continue to believe the system speaks for them. See you in the next video.